The wooden platform creaked under her bare feet as Nora O'Brien stood in chains before a crowd of men whose eyes held either pity or hunger. And she kept her gaze fixed on the distant mountains, because looking at their faces would break what little resolve she had left. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the town square of Greeley, Colorado, on that sweltering July afternoon in 1876, announcing her debts as if they were crimes. $300 owed to the late Samuel Garrett's estate, he declared, and since she had no family and no means to pay, the law permitted this arrangement. Indentured servitude, they called it. Nora called it what it was, slavery by another name, legal only because she was white and destitute rather than free and black. The 13th Amendment had exceptions, and men with money always found ways around words written on paper. Her cotton dress, faded and patched, clung to her skin in the heat. She was 22 years old, and every dream she had carried from Ireland 7 years ago had withered like crops in a drought. Samuel Garrett had promised her honest work in his boarding house, and she had worked honestly. But when fever took him last month, his nephew produced papers claiming she owed far more than her wages could ever cover. False papers, she knew, but a lone woman's word meant nothing against a man's signature. The bidding started low. $50 from a ranch hand with tobacco-stained teeth. $75 from a saloon owner whose establishment she knew employed women for more than serving drinks. The numbers climbed slowly, and Nora felt her stomach turn with each raised hand. She tried to remember prayers her mother had taught her, but the words scattered like dust in wind. Then a new voice cut through the crowd, deep and steady. $300. The square fell silent. Even the auctioneer seemed surprised by the amount, enough to clear her debt entirely with nothing left over for profit. Nora's eyes finally moved from the mountains to find the speaker. He stood at the back of the crowd, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that brushed his collar beneath a worn hat. His face was weathered by sun and wind, probably around 27 or 28, with strong features and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore simple clothes, a blue shirt and dark pants, both clean but mended in places. A working man, not a wealthy one, which made his bid even more startling. "Sir, are you certain?" the auctioneer asked, greed and confusion mixing in his expression. "The bidding need not jump so high." "I am certain," the man said, moving forward through the crowd. $300 to clear the debt entirely. He counted out the money right there, bills and coins that represented months or even years of hard labor. Nora watched his hands as he placed each piece of currency on the auctioneer's table. They were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who knew work as intimately as she did. The auctioneer counted twice, then produced a key and approached Nora. The chains fell away from her wrists and ankles, leaving red marks on her skin. She stood frozen, uncertain what came next. The man who had bought her freedom, or bought her, she did not know which, waited at the platform's edge. "Come on down, miss," he said quietly. His voice lacked the commanding tone she expected. "Let us get you out of this heat." Nora descended the 3 steps carefully, her legs unsteady. The crowd dispersed quickly now that the entertainment had ended, though she felt their curious glances following her. She stopped a few feet from the man, close enough to see that his eyes were indeed gray, and they held something she had not expected: kindness. "My name is Connor Nash," he said, not reaching for her or making any move to establish ownership. "I have a ranch about 5 miles north of town. Do you have belongings you need to collect?" "I have nothing," Nora said, her voice rough from lack of water. "Everything I owned was seized for the debt." Connor's jaw tightened briefly, the only sign of anger crossing his features. "Then we will go straight there." I have a wagon just down the street. Can you walk, or should I bring it here? The question surprised her. I can walk. They moved through Greeley's dusty streets in silence. The town had grown rapidly since the Union colony established it 6 years ago, back in 1870, built on principles of temperance and agriculture. Ironic, Nora thought, that a town founded on moral principles would permit a human auction. But she had learned that principles bent easily when money was involved. Connor's wagon was a sturdy farm vehicle pulled by 2 bay horses. He offered his hand to help her up to the seat, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His grip was firm but gentle, and he released her the moment she was settled. He climbed up beside her and took the reins. There is water in the canteen behind the seat if you are thirsty. Nora was desperately thirsty, but pride made her hesitate. She was acutely aware of her position, bought and paid for, completely at this man's mercy. But her throat burned, and finally need overcame pride. She reached back for the canteen and drank carefully, trying not to gulp though she wanted to drain it. "Drink all you need," Connor said, keeping his eyes on the road. "I refilled it this morning." They left town heading north, the road winding through grassland dotted with farms and ranches. The Rocky Mountains rose to the west, magnificent and indifferent. Nora had always found them beautiful and terrible at once, so permanent while human struggles played out like brief shadows at their feet. "I suppose you are wondering what I expect from you," Connor said, after they had traveled in silence for nearly a mile. Nora's hands tightened on the canteen. "The thought had occurred to me. I have a proposition, though not the kind you might fear." He glanced at her briefly, then back at the road. "My ranch is small, about 160 acres. I run cattle, grow some hay and vegetables. I manage alone mostly, but it is hard work and lonely work. I could use help with the house, the cooking, the garden. Honest work for honest wages." "I have no wages," Nora said carefully. "You paid my debt. By law, that makes me bound to you." "By law," Connor agreed, "but I am not much concerned with laws that permit selling human beings. So here is my proposition. You work for me, and I will pay you $15 a month plus room and board. That is fair wages for a housekeeper. You can save your money. In a year, you would have enough to go wherever you want, start fresh somewhere." Nora stared at him, trying to find the trap in his words. "And if I choose not to work for you at all?" Connor was quiet for a long moment, the only sounds the horses' hooves and the wagon wheels creaking. "Then I will take you back to town, give you $20 for traveling money, and wish you well. You would lose everything you paid." "I would," he acknowledged, "but I did not buy you, Miss O'Brien. I bought your debt and cleared it. What you do now should be your own choice. I am hoping you will choose to stay because I genuinely need help, and you seem like someone who knows hard work. But if you want to leave, I will not stop you." Nora's eyes burned with sudden tears she refused to let fall. In 7 years in America, through all the hardship and betrayal, no one had offered her a choice about anything. Choices were luxuries for people with money and position. "Why did you do this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Connor was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "My mother was sold at auction when I was 15. Different circumstances, but the same helplessness, same crowd of men deciding her fate. I swore then that if I ever had the means, I would not stand by and watch it happen to someone else. What happened to her? The man who bought her debt was not kind," Connor said simply. "She died 2 years later. Influenza, officially, but really she died of a broken spirit in a place she had no choice about being." The words hung between them, heavy with old grief. Nora understood loss. She had lost her parents to famine, her brothers to the sea journey that brought her here, her hopes to the harsh reality of being alone and female in a land that ground down the vulnerable. "I am sorry," she said. "So am I," Connor replied. "So when I heard about the auction today, I knew I had to go. I have been saving money for new breeding stock, but that seemed less important than making sure you had a choice." They crested a gentle rise, and Connor pointed ahead. "There is the ranch." Nora looked and saw a modest spread in a shallow valley. A small house built of wood and stone, a barn, a few outbuildings and fenced pastures where cattle grazed. It was simple and well-maintained, the home of someone who took pride in his work. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided blessed shade. "It is not much," Connor said, and she heard uncertainty in his voice for the first time. "But it is honest land, honestly worked." "It is beautiful," Nora said, and meant it. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them that neither could name. Understanding, perhaps, recognition of shared pain and hope for something better. "So what is your choice?" Connor asked as they descended toward the house. "I will abide by whatever you decide." Nora thought about the $20 he offered, enough to get her to Denver or maybe even California. She thought about being alone again in a world that had shown her only cruelty. She thought about this man who had given away months of savings to free a stranger, who spoke of choices and fair wages, whose eyes held genuine kindness. "I will stay," she said. "For now, at least, we can see how the arrangement works for both of us." Connor's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if he had been holding tension she had not noticed. "Fair enough. And Miss O'Brien, you have my word that you will be safe here. There is a lock on your bedroom door, and I will never enter without permission. This is a business arrangement, nothing more, unless you someday decide otherwise." The unless hung in the air, not threatening but acknowledging possibility. Nora nodded, not trusting herself to speak. They reached the house, and Connor helped her down from the wagon. Up close, she could see the property was even better maintained than it appeared from a distance. The house was small but solid, with a covered porch and real glass windows. Flowers grew in a bed near the door, slightly wild but surviving. "My mother planted those," Connor said, following her gaze. "Before she passed. I have tried to keep them going, but I do not have her touch with growing things." "I can help with that," Nora offered. "My mother had a garden in Ireland. She taught me some." Connor's face brightened. "That would be welcome. Come inside, let me show you the house." The interior was dim after the bright sunlight, but clean and orderly. The main room served as kitchen and living area, with a black iron stove, a sturdy table with 4 chairs, and a pair of rocking chairs near a stone fireplace. Everything was well made but simple, functional rather than decorative. "There are 2 bedrooms," Connor said, pointing to doors on opposite sides of the room. "The one on the right was my mother's. It has been empty for 5 years now, but I have kept it clean. You are welcome to it. The left is mine." He crossed to the right-hand door and opened it. Nora followed and looked into a small room with a single bed covered in a faded quilt, a dresser with a cracked mirror, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. It was sparse but more than she had dared hope for. "There is a lock here, see?" Connor demonstrated, showing her the bolt on the inside of the door. "And the key is in the dresser's top drawer if you want extra security." "Thank you," Nora said softly. "I will leave you to settle in," Connor said, moving toward the door. "Take your time. When you are ready, we can discuss the work schedule and your preferences. There is no rush today." After he left, closing the door behind him, Nora stood in the center of the small room and finally let herself cry. She cried for the terror of the auction, for the years of struggle that led to it, for her lost family and lost dreams. But she also cried with relief, because for the first time in so long, she felt a fragile tendril of hope. She washed her face in the basin she found on the dresser, filled with fresh water Connor must have prepared. Then she lay down on the bed, just for a moment, and fell into exhausted sleep. When she woke, the light had changed to late afternoon gold. She rose and opened the door to find Connor at the stove, cooking something that smelled wonderful. He looked up when he heard her. "I hope you do not mind," he said. "I was making dinner and thought you might be hungry, just stew and biscuits, nothing fancy." "It smells amazing," Nora admitted. Her stomach reminded her that she had not eaten since yesterday. "Should be ready in about 10 minutes, Connor said. "Would you like to sit?" They sat at the table, and Connor served the food with an awkwardness that told Nora he was not accustomed to having company. The stew was simple but good, rich with beef and vegetables, and the biscuits were only slightly burned on the bottom. "I am not much of a cook," Connor admitted. "That will definitely be an area where I appreciate your help." "I can cook," Nora assured him. "I worked in Samuel Garrett's boarding house for 5 years. I can make decent meals from very little." They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Connor said, "Tell me about yourself if you are comfortable doing so. I would like to know who you are beyond the circumstances that brought us together." So Nora told him, haltingly at first, then with more ease. She spoke of growing up in County Cork, of the hunger that drove her family from their land, of the coffin ship that brought them to America in 1869. She was 15 then, traveling with her parents and 2 younger brothers. Her father died during the crossing, buried at sea. Her mother and brothers perished within months of arriving in New York, victims of cholera in the crowded tenements. "I worked in a textile factory for 2 years," she said. "Saved every penny I could. I had heard there were opportunities out west, better chances. So I bought passage on a wagon train and ended up in Denver in 1871. That is where I met Samuel Garrett. He was a kind man, truly. He offered me honest work and I took it. We moved to Greeley when the colony was established, thought there might be more opportunities in a growing town." "He did not marry?" Connor asked carefully. "He was married to his work," Nora said, "and I think his heart had been broken long ago. He never spoke of it, but sometimes I saw him looking at an old photograph of a woman. He treated me well, always respectfully. When he got sick, I nursed him until the end. Then his nephew arrived with those papers." "The nephew should be horsewhipped," Connor said with quiet anger. "Creating false debts to steal your labor." "But he did not steal it," Nora pointed out. "You bought it fairly." "And now I am giving it back," Connor said firmly. "You are not indebted to me, Nora. We are entering an agreement between equals. I pay you wages for your work. If you are unhappy, you can leave. That is how it should be." The way he said her name, without Miss O'Brien's formality, felt intimate and frightening and right all at once. Nora found herself noticing details about him. The way his hair curled slightly at his temples, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the gentleness in his strong hands as he broke his biscuit. "Tell me about you," she said. "It is only fair." Connor's story emerged more slowly than hers, like water from a deep well. He was born in Missouri in 1848, the only child of a farmer and his wife. His father died when Connor was 12, killed in a stupid accident involving a spooked horse. His mother tried to keep the farm going, but debt accumulated. When Connor was 15 in 1863, the creditors came. His mother had no way to pay and they gave her a choice: prison or indentured servitude. "She chose servitude to spare me," Connor said, his voice flat with old pain. "Thought she could work it off, come back to me. But the man who held her debt was cruel and the work was brutal. I tried to get to her, but I was just a boy with nothing. By the time I was old enough to do something, she was gone." "How did you end up here?" Nora asked gently. I worked, Connor said simply. Any job I could find. Saved every cent. Came west in 1870 after the Transcontinental Railroad made it easier. Worked on cattle drives in mines on other men's ranches. Finally saved enough to file a homestead claim 3 years ago in 1873. This land became mine because I worked it and lived on it and made it productive. Everything you see here I built with my own hands. You should be proud, Nora said. It is a fine ranch. It is a start, Connor said. I want to build it into something bigger, not for wealth but for security. I never want to be helpless again, unable to protect someone who matters. The words someone who matters seemed to hang in the air between them. Connor cleared his throat and stood. Let me show you the rest of the property before the light goes. You should know your way around. They walked through the evening coolness, and Connor showed her the barn where he kept 2 horses, explaining their temperaments. He showed her the chicken coop, currently empty, and mentioned he had been meaning to get chickens but kept putting it off. The vegetable garden was struggling, and he admitted with embarrassment that he barely kept it alive. This is where I truly need help, he said. I can handle the cattle and the heavy work, but I am killing everything I try to grow. Nora knelt beside a struggling tomato plant, examining it. They need more water and this soil is too dense. We should work in some manure, create better drainage. You can do that, Connor asked hopefully. I can try, Nora said. My mother worked miracles with less. They walked along the creek as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Connor pointed out the boundaries of his land, the grazing patterns of his small herd of about 30 cattle, his plans for expansion. It is not a big operation, he said. But it is mine, and it supports me. With your help managing the house and garden, I could focus more on building up the herd, maybe even hire a hand in a year or 2. It sounds like a good plan, Nora said. They returned to the house as stars began appearing in the darkening sky. Connor lit lamps and they sat in the rocking chairs, neither quite ready to end the day. Can I ask you something? Nora ventured. Of course. Why are you not married? A man with property, with your character, I would think you would have found someone. Connor was quiet for a long moment. I almost did once. About 4 years ago, there was a woman in town. She was sweet and kind, and I thought we might have a future. But when I told her about my mother, about the auction and the servitude, she looked at me differently. Said she could not marry someone from that kind of background. I realized then that she had been interested in my land, not in me. Since then, I have been cautious. I am sorry, Nora said. She was a fool. Maybe, Connor said. Or maybe she was honest about what she wanted. Either way, it taught me to value genuine character over pretty words. He looked at her then, his gray eyes serious. You have survived terrible things and kept your dignity. That matters more than any amount of beauty, though you have that too. Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks. You should not say such things to me. Why not if they are true? Because I work for you now, it complicates things. You are right, Connor said immediately. I apologize. That was inappropriate. But as Nora lay in bed that night, the lock thrown on her door more from habit than fear, she thought about his words. No one had called her beautiful in years. No one had looked at her the way Connor had, with admiration that went beyond her appearance to something deeper. She told herself to be careful, to guard her heart, to remember that she was dependent on his goodness. But some part of her had already started hoping for something she had not let herself want in a very long time. The next morning, Nora woke to the sound of Connor moving around the main room. She dressed in the same worn dress, wishing desperately for something clean to wear, and emerged to find him preparing a simple breakfast of oatmeal and coffee. "Good morning," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "I thought today we could go into town, get you some proper clothing and supplies. I should have thought of it yesterday." "I cannot accept more from you," Nora protested. "You have already spent so much." "Consider it an advance on your wages," Connor said. "And a necessity. You need more than one dress and shoes that fit properly. I noticed yesterday yours are worn through." It was true. Her shoes had holes in the soles and her feet hurt constantly. "I will pay you back, if you insist," Connor agreed, "but there is no rush. Eat your breakfast, then we will head to town." The trip to Greeley took on a different character this time. Nora was no longer a prisoner being transported, but a woman going to purchase necessities. Connor took her to a dry goods store and told the proprietor, Mrs. Walsh, that Nora needed a complete wardrobe. Mrs. Walsh was a shrewd-eyed woman in her 50s who had clearly heard about yesterday's auction. She looked between Connor and Nora with obvious curiosity, but kept her questions to herself. Instead, she showed Nora several ready-made dresses, 2 everyday cotton ones and a nicer one for Sunday, along with proper undergarments, a nightgown, a warm shawl, and sturdy shoes. "You will need a hat too," Mrs. Walsh said. "The sun out here will ruin your skin." Connor paid for everything without comment, though Nora noticed him wince slightly at the total. She felt guilty spending his money, but also deeply grateful to have clothes that fit and shoes without holes. As they were loading the packages into the wagon, a voice called out, "Well, well, if it is not Connor Nash and his new purchase." They turned to see a well-dressed man in his 30s approaching, his expression smug and unpleasant. Nora recognized him immediately as Samuel Garrett's nephew, Martin Oliver. "Martin," Connor said evenly, "I have nothing to say to you." "Just wanted to make sure you got your money's worth," Martin said, looking at Nora in a way that made her skin crawl. "She is a decent worker if you keep her in line. Has a tendency toward laziness, though." "That is a lie," Nora said sharply. "I worked every day for your uncle without complaint." "Did my uncle tell you to call him that?" Martin sneered. "How familiar were you with the old man?" Connor moved faster than Nora expected, stepping between her and Martin. "You will apologize to Miss O'Brien, or you and I will have a serious problem." "She is your property now," Martin said. "Why do you care if I insult her?" "She is not property," Connor said, his voice dangerously quiet. "She is a free woman working for wages, and if you ever speak to her like that again, I will personally ensure you regret it." For a moment, the two men faced off and Nora feared violence. But Martin apparently saw something in Connor's eyes that convinced him to back down. "Not worth the trouble," Martin muttered, stepping back. "Enjoy your Irish whore." Connor's fist connected with Martin's jaw before Nora even saw him move. Martin went down hard, landing in the dirt street. Connor stood over him, shaking out his hand. "I warned you," Connor said simply. Then he turned to Nora. "Get in the wagon. We are leaving." Nora climbed up quickly, her heart pounding. Connor joined her and urged the horses forward, leaving Martin sitting in the street holding his jaw. Several townspeople had witnessed the exchange, and Nora saw Mrs. Walsh watching from her store window with what looked like approval. They were halfway home before Connor spoke. "I apologize for the violence, but I will not tolerate anyone speaking about you that way." "Thank you," Nora said quietly, "though you may have made an enemy." "Martin Oliver was already an enemy the moment he tried to steal your freedom," Connor said. "At least now he knows you are protected." The word protected warmed something in Nora's chest. She had not felt protected in so long. She had forgotten how it felt to have someone stand up for her. Back at the ranch, Nora spent the afternoon organizing her new clothes in the small dresser, amazed at the luxury of having more than one outfit. Then she turned her attention to the house itself, which, though clean, had the sparse quality of a place maintained rather than lived in. She asked Connor if he minded her making some changes, and he told her to do whatever she wanted. So she began small transformations, moving furniture slightly to create better flow, finding neglected linens in a trunk and washing them to brighten the space, gathering wildflowers from near the creek to place on the table. Connor watched her work with something like wonder. "You are making it a home," he said. "I never knew the difference before, but now I see it." Over the following weeks, they fell into a rhythm. Connor rose before dawn to tend the cattle and handle the heavy ranch work. Nora managed the house, prepared meals that were substantial and good, and worked magic in the vegetable garden. The struggling plants began thriving under her care, and she added new crops from seeds Connor bought at her direction. They ate breakfast and dinner together, sharing stories of their days. Connor told her about his cattle, his plans for the property, his dreams of building something lasting. Nora spoke of the garden's progress, her small improvements to the house, memories of Ireland that she had not shared with anyone in years. Slowly, carefully, they became friends. But underneath the friendship, something deeper grew. Nora caught herself watching Connor as he worked, admiring the strength in his movements and the gentleness in his hands when he handled a newborn calf. She noticed how his face lit up when he saw her, how he listened intently to everything she said as if her words mattered more than anything. Connor, for his part, found excuses to be near her. He offered to help in the garden though he knew nothing about plants. He lingered over meals, reluctant to leave her company. He brought her small gifts from town, a packet of flower seeds, a new mixing bowl, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy. Neither spoke of their growing feelings, both aware of the delicate balance of their arrangement. Nora worried that Connor would think she felt obligated to return his interest. Connor feared that Nora would feel pressured by his position as her employer, but the tension between them built like summer heat before a thunderstorm, heavy and electric and inevitable. One evening in late August, about 6 weeks after Nora's arrival, Connor came in from the fields to find her cooking dinner, her hair escaping from its pins and her face flushed from the heat of the stove. She was singing softly in Irish, a song her mother had taught her, and she did not hear him enter. Connor stood in the doorway, transfixed. In that moment, with the golden light slanting through the windows and her voice filling the house with beauty, he knew with absolute certainty that he loved her. Not just her appearance, though he found her beautiful, but everything about her. Her strength, her kindness, her determination to build something good from the ashes of loss. Nora turned and saw him watching. "I did not hear you come in," she said, suddenly shy under his gaze. "Do not stop singing," Connor said. "It was beautiful." "It is just an old song my mother taught me," Nora said, turning back to the stove. "A silly thing about a girl waiting for her love to return from the sea." "Nothing about you is silly," Connor said, moving closer. "Nora, we need to talk." She stilled, her hand tightening on the wooden spoon. "That sounds serious." "It is," Connor said. "But not bad, I hope. Can you leave that for a moment?" Nora set down the spoon and turned to face him, her heart hammering. Connor took a breath, clearly gathering courage. "When I brought you here, I promised you a choice," he began. "I promised this would be a business arrangement, nothing more unless you decided otherwise. I have tried to honor that, to give you space and safety and the freedom to make your own decisions." "You have," Nora said softly. "You have been nothing but honorable." "But I need to be honest with you," Connor continued. "These past weeks, getting to know you, living alongside you, I have developed feelings that go beyond employer and employee, beyond even friendship. I have fallen in love with you, Nora." Nora's breath caught. She had hoped but not dared to believe. "I know the timing is complicated," Connor rushed on. "I know you might feel obligated because you work for me. That is the last thing I want. So I need you to understand that no matter how you respond to this, Your position here is secure. If you do not feel the same way, we will continue as we have been, and I will never mention it again. If you want to leave entirely, I will give you your wages and enough extra to start fresh somewhere else. You owe me nothing, Nora. Your choices are your own." Tears spilled down Nora's cheeks and Connor's face fell. "I am sorry," he said. "I should not have said anything. Please do not cry." "You foolish man," Nora said, her voice breaking between tears and laughter. "I am crying because I love you too. I have been so afraid to tell you, so worried you would think I was just grateful or obligated. But Connor, you are the best man I have ever known, and I have loved you for weeks now." The joy that spread across Connor's face was like sunrise. "Truly, truly," Nora said. Connor closed the distance between them, cupping her face in his hands. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Nora breathed. His lips met hers gently at first, questioning, then with growing passion as she responded. Nora wrapped her arms around his neck, and Connor pulled her close, and for long moments the world consisted only of this. The two of them finally acknowledging what had been building since the day he freed her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Connor rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly. Marry you if you will have me. Build a life together that you choose every single day." "I choose you," Nora said. "I already chose you, Connor. Every day I stay here, I am choosing you." "Then let me ask properly," Connor said. He stepped back and, to Nora's amazement, dropped to one knee. "Nora O'Brien, would you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife? I promise to love you, protect you, and honor your choices for as long as I live." "Yes," Nora said, pulling him to his feet. "Yes, absolutely yes." They kissed again, deeper this time, until the smell of burning reminded Nora of the forgotten dinner. She turned with a yelp to rescue the food, and Connor laughed, the sound full and joyous in a way she had never heard from him before. That night, they sat on the porch under the stars and talked about their future. Connor wanted to marry soon, but Nora insisted they take some time to court properly, to build their relationship on more than gratitude and attraction. "I want to be sure," she said. "Not for my sake, I already know my heart, but for yours. You saved me, Connor, and I will always be grateful for that. But I want you to know that I am marrying you because I love you, not because I owe you." "I already know that," Connor said, holding her hand. "But I understand. We will court for as long as you need." They settled on a 3-month courtship, time enough to be certain and to prepare for a wedding. During those months, Connor courted Nora with sweet determination. He took her on picnics by the creek, brought her flowers from town, wrote her clumsy but heartfelt love letters that made her cry. Nora began adding her own touches to the ranch, planting perennials that would bloom year after year, preserving vegetables for winter, making the house truly theirs rather than just Connor's. She also began going into town with Connor, no longer hiding from the curious stares but holding her head high as his intended. Not everyone approved. Martin Oliver spread rumors, suggesting impropriety and predicting the marriage would fail. Some of the town's more proper ladies looked down on Nora for her past at the auction, as if being poor were a moral failing, but others embraced them. Mrs. Walsh became a genuine friend, offering advice on marriage and secretly sewing a wedding dress for Nora. The pastor of the community church, Reverend Thompson, agreed to perform the ceremony and made it clear he admired Connor for what he had done. "You lived your faith," Reverend Thompson told Connor, "not just speaking of Christian charity but acting on it. That is what matters." The wedding took place on a crisp November morning in 1876, exactly 4 months after Connor bought Nora's freedom. The church was small but full, mostly with Connor's friends from neighboring ranches and kind townspeople who supported the match. Nora wore the dress Mrs. Walsh had made, simple but beautiful in cream-colored silk, with flowers from their garden woven into her red hair. Connor wore his best suit, nervous and proud and radiating happiness. As they stood before Reverend Thompson and exchanged vows, Nora thought about the journey that brought her here. The loss, the struggle, the moment of absolute despair on that auction platform. And now this, a new beginning with a good man who loved her for exactly who she was. I, Nora O'Brien, take you, Connor Nash, to be my lawfully wedded husband, she said, her voice strong and certain. To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do us part. Connor's voice was thick with emotion as he repeated his vows. I, Connor Nash, take you, Nora O'Brien, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to honor your choices, protect your freedom, and love you with everything I am for all of my days. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Connor kissed Nora with such tenderness that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. They walked down the aisle together into their new life, surrounded by well-wishers and hope. The celebration afterward was simple, held at the ranch with food Nora and Connor had prepared together, music from a neighbor's fiddle, and dancing under the autumn sky. As the sun set and their guests began departing, Connor pulled Nora close and whispered, "Are you happy?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," Nora said honestly. "You gave me back my life, Connor, my freedom, my choices, and now my future." "You gave me something too," Connor said. "A reason to build something beyond just survival. A home instead of a house. Love instead of loneliness." That night, they came together as husband and wife in the bed that had been Connor's alone, and everything between them was tenderness and passion, and the profound relief of two people who had found home in each other. The first year of their marriage brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. Winter came hard that year, with storms that buried the ranch in snow and temperatures that dropped well below zero. Connor and Nora worked side by side to keep the cattle alive, breaking ice on the creek, hauling hay through drifts, checking obsessively for signs of frostbite or illness in the herd. During those long winter nights, trapped inside by blizzards, they talked for hours, sharing every detail of their lives and dreams. Connor told Nora about his childhood before his father's death, the happy times he barely let himself remember. Nora spoke of Ireland with more honesty than she had before, admitting how much she still missed it even as she built a new life here. "Sometimes I feel guilty," she confessed one night as they lay in bed listening to wind howl outside. "For being happy here when my family died trying to reach this country." "Your family would want you to be happy," Connor said, holding her close. "Staying miserable would not honor them. Living well, building something good that honors their sacrifice." In spring, Nora discovered she was pregnant. The news brought joy mixed with terror. She had seen too many women die in childbirth, knew the risks intimately. Connor, sensing her fear, brought the doctor from town to examine her and provide reassurance. "You are healthy and strong, doctor," Harrison told her, "and I will be here when your time comes. You are going to be fine." Connor hovered protectively, trying not to be overbearing but obviously worried. Nora found his concern endearing even when it became excessive. "I am pregnant, not made of glass," she told him when he tried to prevent her from working in the garden. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "But you are not just any woman," Connor said. "You are my woman and I cannot lose you." The vulnerability in his voice made Nora soften. "You will not lose me. I promise." Their son was born on a cold February night in 1878, during a storm that prevented Dr. Harrison from reaching them. Connor delivered the baby himself with Nora's guidance, his hands shaking but steady when it mattered most. When he placed the squalling infant on Nora's chest, both of them were crying. "He is perfect," Connor said, his voice full of wonder. "You are both perfect." They named him Thomas, after Nora's father. He had Nora's red hair and Connor's gray eyes, and from the beginning he was a fighter, loud and demanding and full of life. Parenthood transformed them both. Connor, who had worked constantly before, now found reasons to come inside during the day to see his son. Nora, who had been slowly healing from past trauma, found new strength in motherhood. Together they navigated sleepless nights, first smiles, and the everyday miracles of watching their child grow. The ranch prospered along with their family. With Nora managing the household and garden so efficiently, Connor had time to expand the herd and improve the property. They hired a young ranch hand named Jack to help with the heavy work, and under Connor's mentorship, he learned quickly. By their third anniversary in 1879, the ranch had grown from 30 cattle to nearly 80, and Connor was discussing purchasing adjacent land from a retiring neighbor. They had money in the bank, respect in the community, and a home filled with love and laughter. But their peace was shattered one summer morning when Martin Oliver rode onto their property with a sheriff and several armed men. Connor was out checking fence lines, so Nora faced them alone, holding Thomas on her hip. "Mrs. Nash," the sheriff said, looking uncomfortable, "I am afraid I have to ask you some questions. Mr. Oliver here has filed a complaint claiming you and your husband defrauded him of property rightfully his." "That is absurd," Nora said, keeping her voice steady. "What property could we possibly have taken from him?" "You," Martin said with a nasty smile. "My uncle left his entire estate to me, including all debts owed. You belong to that estate. Connor Nash paid $300 for you, but I never received that money. It went to the auctioneer and was supposed to come to me, but there is no record of it. I am claiming you were sold illegally, and everything you have earned or produced since then, including that child, rightfully belongs to me." Ice flooded Nora's veins. "That is insane. The auction was legal. Connor has receipts. Receipts that have conveniently disappeared," Martin said. "The auctioneer has left town, and there is no official record of the sale. As far as the law is concerned, you are still indentured to my uncle's estate, which means to me." "Sheriff Dawson," Nora said, appealing to the lawman, "you know this is wrong." Sheriff Dawson looked deeply uncomfortable. "Mrs. Nash, I do not like this any more than you do. But Mr. Oliver has papers from a Denver lawyer claiming the sale was improper. Until Mr. Nash can produce proof of payment, I have to investigate." "Connor has proof," Nora said desperately. "He kept everything." "Then he can show me when he returns," the sheriff said. "In the meantime, I am afraid I need you to come to town and sort this out." "I am not going anywhere with Martin Oliver," Nora said flatly. "If you want me in town, you can wait for my husband." "I am afraid I cannot do that," the sheriff said. "Mr. Oliver has secured an emergency injunction. Until this is settled, you and the child are technically property in dispute." "She is my wife," Connor's voice rang out across the yard. He was riding hard toward the house, having apparently seen the group from wherever he had been working. He dismounted before his horse fully stopped and strode to Nora's side. "What the hell is going on here?" Sheriff Dawson explained the situation, and Connor's face darkened with fury. "That is complete nonsense. I have receipts, witnesses, everything. This is harassment." "Then show me the proof and this ends now," the sheriff said. Connor went inside and emerged minutes later with a metal box containing his important papers. He sorted through them quickly, then more frantically. Finally, he looked up, his face pale. "They are gone. The receipts from the auction, the bill of sale, all of it. They were here last month when I checked." "How convenient," Martin said smugly. "You broke into my house," Connor said, moving toward Martin with violence in his eyes. "You stole those papers." "That is a serious accusation," Martin said. "Can you prove it?" Connor could not, and everyone knew it. Sheriff Dawson sighed. "Mr. Nash, I am going to give you 1 week to produce evidence of your legitimate purchase. Until then, Mrs. Nash and the child will remain in town under supervision." "No," Connor said flatly. "My wife stays here." "Connor," Nora said quietly, touching his arm. "If I refuse, it will only make things worse. Let me go to town. You find proof of what we know is true, this will be resolved." "I am not letting you anywhere near him," Connor said, pulling her close. "She will not be near me," Martin said. "She will be held at the church under Reverend Thompson's supervision until the hearing. All very proper." The fact that Martin had arranged for church supervision told Nora he was confident in his case. He had planned this carefully, stolen the papers, and created a legal trap. "I will fight this," Connor said, his voice shaking with rage. "I will fight this with everything I have." "Then you have a week," Sheriff Dawson said. "Mrs. Nash, please gather some things." The ride to town was a nightmare. Nora sat in the sheriff's wagon with Thomas, trying to soothe her frightened son while her own fear threatened to overwhelm her. Connor followed on horseback, refusing to leave them. Reverend Thompson was appalled when he heard the situation. "This is a mockery of justice," he said to Sheriff Dawson. "These people are married, upstanding members of our community." "I agree," the sheriff said, "but I have to follow the law. Keep her safe, Reverend. Make sure Oliver does not go anywhere near her." Nora was installed in a small room adjacent to the church, sparse but clean. Connor stayed until Sheriff Dawson insisted he leave, promising Nora he would find the proof they needed. "I will not lose you," Connor said fiercely, holding her and Thomas close. "I will burn this whole town down before I let him take you." "Do not do anything rash," Nora begged. "We need the law on our side. Find the evidence, Connor. I know it exists." Over the next 3 days, Connor moved heaven and earth trying to reconstruct proof of the purchase. He tracked down people who had witnessed the auction, but their testimony was considered insufficient without documentation. He went to the land office, the courthouse, anywhere that might have secondary records. He even sent telegrams to Denver trying to locate the auctioneer who had left town. Meanwhile, Nora waited in her small room, caring for Thomas and praying. Reverend Thompson was kind, bringing her meals and assuring her the community supported her. Mrs. Walsh visited daily, providing companionship and supplies for Thomas. On the 4th day, Connor appeared with a stranger, a thin man in a rumpled suit. "Nora, this is Arthur Klein. He is a lawyer from Denver, and he has been investigating Martin's claims." Klein sat down and explained what he had discovered. Martin Oliver forged most of his uncle's estate documents. Samuel Garrett did leave him a small inheritance, but nothing like what Martin claimed. "He created the debt Martin attributed to you to steal your labor. Then when Connor bought your freedom, Martin saw an opportunity for more fraud. He stole Connor's receipts and bribed the auctioneer to leave town." "Can you prove this?" Nora asked desperately. "I can," Klein said. "I found the real will in Denver filed properly. I also found the auctioneer who, faced with prosecution for fraud, admitted Martin paid him to disappear and destroy records. I have sworn affidavits, documents, everything we need." Relief flooded through Nora so powerfully she felt dizzy. Connor pulled her into his arms, and for a moment they just held each other while Thomas babbled happily between them. The hearing took place the next day. Klein presented his evidence methodically, and Sheriff Dawson's expression grew darker as the extent of Martin's fraud became clear. When Klein finished, Martin had no defense. He had been caught in his lies. "Mr. Oliver," Sheriff Dawson said coldly, "you are under arrest for fraud, theft, and conspiracy. Mrs. Nash, you and your family are free to go. I apologize for putting you through this ordeal." Martin was led away in handcuffs, his face twisted with impotent rage. Nora felt no satisfaction watching him go, only exhaustion and relief that the nightmare was over. Connor hired Klein to handle Martin's prosecution and ensure all charges stuck. The trial 3 months later resulted in a 5-year prison sentence for Martin, along with restitution payments to Connor and Nora for their legal expenses and emotional distress. But the ordeal left scars. For weeks after, Nora had nightmares about being torn from her family. Connor became even more protective, installing new locks on all the doors and keeping his rifle closer. Thomas, too young to understand what happened, picked up on his parents' anxiety and became clingy. Slowly, with time and love, they healed. Connor surprised Nora by using Martin's restitution payment to buy her something she had mentioned once in passing: a piano. It arrived from Denver on a freight wagon, a beautiful upright that Connor installed in their living room. "I know you said your mother played," Connor said as Nora stared at the instrument in shock. "I thought you might want to learn." Nora did learn, teaching herself from books and eventually taking lessons from a music teacher in town. Music became her therapy, a way to process fear and rediscover joy. She played Irish songs her mother had sung, hymns from church, and popular tunes that made Thomas dance. Their life regained its rhythm, richer now for having been tested. Connor expanded the ranch, purchasing that adjacent property and increasing their herd to over 100 cattle. With prosperity came the ability to improve their home, adding rooms and modern conveniences. In 1881, Nora became pregnant again. This time she was less afraid, having survived her first pregnancy and childbirth. Their daughter was born in April, a healthy baby with Connor's dark hair and Nora's green eyes. They named her Rose after Connor's mother. Watching Connor with their daughter, seeing the tenderness in his touch and the wonder in his eyes, Nora fell in love with him all over again. He was an incredible father, patient and playful, teaching Thomas about ranching while cradling Rose with careful gentleness. The years flowed past, each bringing changes. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, learning ranching from the ground up. Rose was spirited and bright, charming everyone she met. In 1883, they welcomed a third child, another son they named Samuel, after the man who had given Nora her first honest work in America. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Connor earned a reputation as a fair employer and skilled rancher. Nora became known for her gardens, which produced abundance she shared generously with neighbors, and her music, which she offered freely at church and community gatherings. They were not wealthy by Eastern standards, but they lived comfortably with security and respect. More importantly, they were happy. Their marriage deepened with time, passion mellowing into profound partnership and devotion. On their 10th anniversary in 1886, Connor took Nora on a trip to Denver, their first time away from the ranch and children together. They stayed in a nice hotel, ate in restaurants, and attended a concert at the Opera House. It was a glimpse of the life they might have had if circumstances were different, but Nora found herself missing their ranch, eager to return home. "I do not need fancy things," she told Connor as they rode the train back to Greeley. "Our life is enough, more than enough." "You deserve fancy things," Connor said. "You deserve everything good in this world." "I have everything good," Nora said, taking his hand. "I have you, our children, our home. That auction was the worst moment of my life, but it led me to the best thing in my life. You." Connor kissed her hand. "I knew from the moment I saw you standing there, so brave even in chains, that you were someone extraordinary." "Buying your freedom was not charity, Nora. It was the best investment I ever made because it brought you into my life." "We saved each other," Nora said softly. "You gave me freedom and choice. I gave you love and home. We built this life together." As the train carried them home through the vast Colorado landscape, Nora reflected on the journey that brought her here, the losses that shaped her, the desperate years that taught her strength, that terrible day on the auction block that seemed like an ending but was really a beginning. She thought about the choice Connor gave her that first day to stay or leave, and how that gift of choice had transformed her life. She had chosen to stay not once but every day since, and every day the choice became easier, more natural, until it was not a choice at all but simply living the life she was meant for. They returned to find their children thriving under Mrs. Walsh's care, the ranch running smoothly and home exactly as they left it. That night, after the children were asleep, Connor and Nora sat on their porch as they had so many times over the years, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. "I have been thinking," Connor said, "about expanding further, maybe bringing in sheep along with the cattle, diversifying." "That sounds wise," Nora said. "Those sheep are more work." "True, but Thomas is getting old enough to help seriously, and Jack has become a good foreman. I think we could manage it." They talked about plans and dreams, their voices quiet and content in the darkness. This was their life now, filled with work and children and endless practical considerations. But threaded through it all was love, the foundation on which everything else rested. Years continued passing, bringing more changes. Thomas grew into a young man, attending agricultural college in Fort Collins for 2 years before returning to help run the ranch full-time. Rose revealed artistic talents, her drawings and paintings becoming increasingly accomplished. Samuel, always the adventurer, spoke of becoming a surveyor and exploring the remaining wild territories. Connor's hair silvered at the temples, and lines deepened around his eyes from years of squinting into the sun. Nora's red hair gained streaks of white, and her hands grew rough from decades of work. But they remained strong and healthy, their bond as solid as the mountains. In 1893, 17 years after that first meeting, Colorado granted women the right to vote in state and local elections. Nora marked her ballot with profound emotion, thinking of all the women who had been denied choices and voices. Connor stood beside her at the polling place, proud and supportive, understanding the significance of the moment. "You earned this right," he told her. "You and every woman who fought for it." "I wish your mother could have seen this day," Nora said. "She deserved choices too. She would have been proud," Connor said, "of you, of this, of what we built together." That evening they celebrated with their children and neighbors, the house full of laughter and hope for the future. Thomas brought a young woman named Sarah, whom he had been courting, and Nora saw in their shy glances the echoes of her own early love with Connor. Life moved forward in its inexorable way. Thomas married Sarah and built a house on the far end of the ranch property. Rose went to Denver to study art, writing long letters home about her classes and the exciting city life. Samuel joined a surveying expedition and sent telegrams from remote locations, full of enthusiasm for the work. Connor and Nora found themselves alone again in the house that had seen so much life. But instead of feeling empty, it felt peaceful, a return to the partnership that had started everything. "We did well," Connor said one evening in 1896, their 20th anniversary approaching. "Our children are happy and successful. The ranch is prosperous. We have built something that will outlast us. We did, Nora agreed. Though I am not ready to be outlasted just yet, I have plenty of living left to do. Connor laughed. Good, because I plan to keep you around for at least another 50 years. They celebrated their 20th anniversary surrounded by family. Thomas and Sarah brought their infant son, Connor's first grandchild, named Connor James Nash. Rose came home from Denver with a portfolio of paintings, including a beautiful portrait of Connor and Nora that captured not just their faces, but the love between them. Samuel arrived from his surveying work with stories of distant mountains and wild country. The house overflowed with food, music, and joy. Neighbors and friends joined the celebration, and Reverend Thompson, now elderly but still serving the community, offered a blessing over the couple who had overcome so much. 20 years ago, some people questioned this marriage, Reverend Thompson said. They saw only the circumstances that brought you together, not the love that bound you, but you proved that real love transcends circumstances. You built a marriage on respect, partnership, and genuine affection. You raised wonderful children and created a home that blesses everyone who enters it. May God grant you many more years together. As the sun set on that anniversary celebration, Connor and Nora stood together on their porch one more time, watching the familiar landscape painted in gold and shadow. Do you ever think about that day? Connor asked. The auction. Sometimes, Nora admitted, but not with pain anymore. I think about how I felt when you offered me a choice, how revolutionary that was. You gave me back my humanity when the world tried to take it. That was when I started falling in love with you. I fell in love with your strength, Connor said. Standing there in chains but unbroken, I knew you were someone extraordinary. We were both broken, Nora said. You from losing your mother, me from years of loss and struggle. But we healed each other. That is what love does when it is real. Connor pulled her close, and they stood together as darkness fell and stars emerged. The ranch settled into night around them, cattle lowing softly in the pastures, the creek murmuring its endless song, the mountains standing eternal watch. This was their kingdom, built not on wealth or power but on love freely given and received. Built on a choice offered and accepted, renewed every day for 20 years and counting. In the house behind them, their family laughed and talked and made memories. On the land around them, their legacy grew in sturdy children and productive acres. And in each other's arms, they held everything that mattered. The years ahead would bring more changes. There would be more grandchildren, eventually great-grandchildren. The ranch would continue evolving, adapting to new agricultural methods and changing times. Rose would become a renowned artist. Samuel would map remote territories and write books about his adventures. Thomas would expand the ranch into one of the largest operations in northern Colorado. But through it all, through every change and challenge, Connor and Nora would remain each other's constant. Their love, forged in the crucible of hardship and choice, would endure as the foundation upon which everything else was built. They had started with an auction and a choice. They had built a lifetime of love and legacy. And when they were very old, sitting on that same porch in the early decades of the 20th century, they would hold hands and remember. Remember the young man who spent his savings to free a stranger. Remember the young woman who chose to stay with a man who offered her dignity and respect. Remember falling in love despite fear and uncertainty. Remember building a life together through sheer will and devotion. And they would know, with the certainty that comes from a life well lived, that every choice they made to love each other was the right one. Every day they chose to stay was exactly what they were meant to do, because sometimes the worst moments lead to the best things. Sometimes freedom is not about leaving but about having the choice to stay. And sometimes love is not about grand gestures but about daily decisions to build a life together, one choice at a time. Connor and Nora Nash had made those choices. And in doing so, they had created a love story that would be told for generations, a testament to the power of human dignity, compassion, and the revolutionary act of offering someone a choice when the world would have denied them one. Their story was not just about a cowboy who bought a woman's freedom at an auction. It was about two people who saved each other, who chose love when they could have chosen safety, who built something beautiful from the ruins of loss and injustice. It was about coming home, not to a place but to a person. And it was about the simple, profound truth that love, real love, is always a choice. And choosing each other every single day was the greatest adventure of all. As they sat together on their porch in the twilight of their years, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and deeply loved, Connor and Nora knew they would do it all again. Every struggle, every fear, every hard moment, because all of it led to this, a love that transcended its difficult beginning to become something eternal. The auction platform was long gone, torn down and forgotten. But what began there endured, a partnership of equals, a love built on respect and choice, a family rooted in devotion. That was their legacy, more valuable than land or wealth, more enduring than any monument. They had taken chains and turned them into freedom. They had taken despair and transformed it into hope. They had taken a transaction and alchemized it into a love story for the ages. And every time Connor looked at Nora, every time she smiled at him across the table or reached for his hand in the darkness, they both remembered. This was what they chose. This was what they built. This was love in its truest, most profound form. The choice to stay had been the first of many. But it was the foundation on which everything else rested. And neither of them had ever, for a single moment, regretted it. Their love story began with an ending and became a new beginning. It started with loss and grew into abundance. It began with a man offering a woman a choice, and it became a lifetime of choosing each other, over and over again, until the choosing became as natural as breathing. That was the story of Connor and Nora Nash. A cowboy who bought a woman's freedom at an auction and gave her the choice to leave or stay. A woman who chose to stay and found in that choice everything she had ever wanted. Two people who built a love that endured because it was founded on the most precious gift one person can give another: the freedom to choose and the daily decision to choose love.